I used to suffer from sleep paralysis every night, but when I finally saw the man from my nightmares, he offered me a choice. My name is Julian, and for 28 years, my nights have been a battleground. To the waking world, I am a freelance graphic designer, a man who lives a quiet, ordered life in a small, third-floor apartment that smells faintly of coffee and turpentine. But when I sleep, I become a cartographer of a hidden, terrifying landscape. I am an unwilling explorer of the borderlands between consciousness and the void. The doctors call it chronic sleep paralysis with hypnagogic hallucinations. I call it the wait. It always begins the same way. The dream, whatever it may be, will fray at the edges, the logic of its narrative dissolving into a grey, fuzzy static. A slow, creeping awareness returns to me. I can feel the texture of the cheap cotton sheets against my skin, the specific, lumpy geography of my pillow under my head, the faint, distant hum of the city outside my window. My eyes are open. I can see my bedroom, a familiar landscape of shadows and moonlight. I am awake, but the final, crucial connection, the spark that allows the mind to command the body, is missing. I am a ghost in my own machine, a prisoner behind my own eyes, capable of sight and thought, but nothing else. Then comes the pressure. It starts as a faint heaviness in my chest, a cat settling on my sternum, but it grows exponentially into a crushing geological force. It feels as if a slab of granite is being lowered onto me, squeezing the air from my lungs, pinning my very soul to the mattress. My heart hammers a frantic, silent rhythm, a trapped bird beating against the bars of my rib cage. And with the pressure, come the visitors. For most of my life, they were indistinct things. What the online communities I frequented called shadow people. They were patches of a deeper, more profound darkness, vaguely man-shaped, that would stand in the corners of my room, their presence a quiet, malevolent statement. They were a part of the terrifying decor of my paralysis, as predictable and unchanging as the pressure on my chest. I learned to endure them. I learned to detach, to mentally retreat into a corner of my own mind and simply wait for the storm to pass, for the connection to my body to be restored with a sudden electric jolt. I even started a blog, an anonymous chronicle of my nightly ordeals titled The Architecture of a Haunting. It became a small sanctuary for others like me, a place to share our field notes from the abyss. We were a small, strange community, trading stories of our faceless tormentors, finding a bizarre sense of normalcy in our shared abnormal reality. But a month ago, the decor changed. The familiar, indistinct shadows in the corners vanished. The cast of my nightly play was reduced to a single, terrifying lead actor. He appeared not in a corner, but at the foot of my bed, a place of prominence, of command. He was tall, unnaturally thin, his limbs long and elegant like a Giacometti sculpture. His form was not made of shadow, but of something far stranger. He was translucent, and his body was wreathed in a constant, shimmering static, a visual hiss, as if he were a poor radio signal from a distant station struggling to tune into my reality. He had no discernible face, just a smooth, ovoid shape, where a head should be, from which 2 points of faint, white light glowed like dying embers. I called him the Glitch Man on my blog. His arrival marked a fundamental shift in the nature of my haunting. The shadow people had been passive observers. He was attentive, he was intelligent, and with his arrival, the pressure on my chest became heavier, the air in my room colder. He brought with him a new, terrifying element. He began to show me things. As I lay pinned to the bed, my wide, terrified eyes locked on his shimmering, unstable form, he would project images directly into my mind. They were not my memories. They were windows into other rooms, other lives. I saw a young woman in a floral wallpapered bedroom, her eyes wide as a dark, oily, amorphous shape coiled on her ceiling. I saw an old man in a sterile hospital bed, a creature made of jagged, sharp angles crouched on his chest, its form invisible to the nurse, who was calmly checking his vitals. I was seeing other people, other sufferers, at the exact moment of their own private wars. The glitch man was turning my personal hell into a panoramic, interconnected atlas of global terror. And I had no idea why. The nightly visitations of the glitch man became a new and horrifying routine. My blog, once a calm, analytical space, transformed into a chronicle of escalating dread. I described the visions he fed me in frantic detail. The student in his dorm room, frozen in terror as his own smiling, predatory reflection began to climb out of his mirror. The child cowering under his blankets as long, thin, spider-like fingers, each tipped with a shard of obsidian, crept from the shadows beneath his bed. My small community of followers was a mixture of captivated and deeply concerned. Seasoned fellow travelers in these nocturnal landscapes confirmed the core of my experiences, the pressure, the fear, but none had ever encountered a consistent, recurring entity like mine, let alone one that acted as a psychic broadcaster for other people's nightmares. The consensus was grim. My case was not just chronic, it was evolving. The barrier between my sleep state and waking reality, the very membrane that keeps the horrors of the subconscious contained, was becoming dangerously thin. They were right. The haunting refused to be confined to my bedroom. The glitch man began to bleed into the edges of my waking life. It started subtly. I would be walking down a busy street, and for a split second, I would see him, a tall, shimmering, translucent shape reflected in a storefront window, standing just behind my own reflection, before vanishing. I would be on a crowded subway car, and as it plunged into the darkness of a tunnel, I would see his form for a brief, terrifying moment in the darkened glass, his 2 points of white light for eyes watching me from the other side of the train. These were not hallucinations. They were too clear, too consistent. They were echoes, ripples from the nightly intrusions leaking into the physical world. My apartment, my sanctuary, became the epicenter of this bleed-through. I would hear faint, whispering static from my unplugged television. The lights in my apartment would flicker and dim in a slow, rhythmic pulse that matched the shimmering of his dream form. One afternoon, I came home from a grocery run to find a single, perfect handprint on the fogged-up glass of my bathroom mirror. It was not made of moisture. It was a dry, static-charged outline, and the fingers were too long, too thin to be human. The visions he fed me during my paralysis episodes also began to change. They were no longer just a chaotic montage of random terror. He began to focus on a single individual, a young woman named Clara, whose blog I had followed for years. Knew her story, her struggles with a particularly aggressive form of sleep paralysis. Now, I was an unwilling spectator to her nightly battles. I saw the specific, unique entity that haunted her bloated, leering thing that smelled of damp, earth, and old leaves, which she called the gardener. I saw her bedroom. I saw the fear in her eyes. I saw her desperate, silent struggles to break free. The glitch man was forcing me to watch her torment, night after night. It felt cruel, sadistic, but the intention behind it was not malice. It was something else, something I could not yet comprehend. It felt like he was trying to teach me a language, to show me the specific patterns and behaviors of these hunters, as he would later name them. He was not just showing me horror, he was showing me an enemy. The shared experience, though terrifying, created a strange, one-sided intimacy. I felt like I knew Clara. I knew the specific way her breath hitched when the gardener manifested. I knew the name of the cat that slept, oblivious, at the foot of her bed. And I was completely, utterly powerless to help her. The nightly invasions and the waking world echoes became the new, terrifying rhythm of my life. My work suffered. My world shrank to the size of my apartment and the flickering screen of my log, a digital message in a bottle cast into a sea of fellow insomniacs. The forced viewings of Clara's torment were taking a toll. I felt a profound, helpless guilt, the shame of a spectator watching a slow-motion catastrophe unfold. I saw the gardener, her personal demon, grow bolder, its presence in her room more tangible, the pressure on her chest more intense. I felt, in a strange, intuitive way that I knew came from the glitch man, that she was losing. Her psychic defenses were crumbling. The thought of her being consumed by this thing filled me with a desperate, impotent rage. It was this rage that finally gave me the strength to fight back. The paralysis episode began as it always did. The grey static, the returning consciousness, the slow, crushing weight on my chest. The glitch man materialized in his usual spot at the foot of my bed, his form seeming to buzz with a new, urgent energy. The vision of Clara's bedroom slammed into my mind. It was the worst I had ever seen. The gardener was no longer just a presence. It was physically manifesting, its form of damp leaves and dark soil coalescing on the ceiling above her. Its long, vine-like tendrils slowly reaching down towards her sleeping form. I felt a wave of absolute, final terror from her, a silent scream that was not a fight for survival, but an admission of defeat. Something inside me snapped. A primal animal instinct for survival, not for myself, but for her, erupted. I would not watch this happen. I roared in the silent prison of my own mind. I poured every ounce of my willpower, every scrap of my consciousness, into a single, desperate command: move. I focused on my right hand, on the simple, impossible act of clenching my fingers into a fist. The pressure on my chest became a physical blow, a solid, monolithic force trying to crush me into the mattress. The entity holding me down, the hunter, that had been a nameless, faceless weight my entire life, could feel my rebellion. And it pushed back with furious, overwhelming power. My vision went white with the strain. I could feel the delicate blood vessels in my eyes bursting. But the thought of Clara, of the gardener's descending tendrils, fueled my defiance. I pulled, not with my muscles, but with my soul, straining against the very fabric of my paralysis. And then, with a sound like tearing thick, ancient canvas, the connection broke. I lurched upright in bed with a huge, ragged gasp, my body convulsing, the air flooding back into my lungs. I was drenched in sweat, my heart a wild, frantic drum. Against my ribs, I was awake. I could move. The paralysis was shattered. For a dizzying, triumphant second, I thought I had one. But the room was not empty. The air was cold, thick with the scent of ozone and static. And the glitch man was still there. He had not vanished with the dream. He stood at the foot of my bed, his shimmering, translucent form now perfectly, terrifyingly visible in the waking world, his 2 points of white light, 4 eyes fixed on me with an unreadable intensity. The barrier was not just thin, I had torn it open, and I had pulled him through with me. We stared at each other across the small, silent space of my bedroom. My mind, which should have been screaming, went into a state of shock-induced, analytical calm. He was not a hallucination. He was not a dream. He was a presence in my room, as real as the lamp on my nightstand or the books on my shelf. He was about 7 feet tall, his form humanoid but impossibly slender, like a figure stretched by a distorted lens. The static that composed his body was not chaotic. It moved in slow, complex, flowing patterns, like a captured electrical storm. The 2 points of white light in his ovoid head were not eyes in a traditional sense. They were apertures, windows into a place of pure, cold, and ancient energy. There was no malice emanating from him, no sense of threat. There was only a profound, almost weary stillness, and a calm, focused attentiveness, like a scientist observing a specimen that has just done something utterly unexpected. The visions in my head had ceased, but a new, more direct form of communication began. It was not a voice that I heard with my ears. It was a stream of pure, unfiltered concepts, flowing directly into my consciousness like a data transfer. The thoughts were not in English or any human language, but my mind translated them instantly, instinctively. The barrier is thin. The thought resonated, clean and cold as glacial ice. You have made it thin. The emotional feedback, the resonant anger, it was a fulcrum. You have pulled me across. The pieces began to fall into place, forming a picture of terrifying, cosmic scale. The visions he had shown me flashed through my mind again. Clara and the gardener, the old man and the creature of sharp angles. But now, they were imbued with a horrifying new context. They were not just nightmares, they were attacks. They are the hunters, the thought continued, calm and declarative. They are predators. They feed on the vulnerable, the sleeping, the paralyzed. They are parasitic consciousnesses, drawn to the psychic energy released by fear. The state you call paralysis is the hunt. The pressure you feel is their attempt to breach the veil, to form a parasitic link. A wave of cold, dizzying understanding washed over me. The crushing weight on my chest, the feeling of being suffocated. A sensation I had always attributed to a malfunction of my own brain. It was not a symptom. It was a defense. It was the feeling of my own subconscious, my own soul, fighting back against an intruder. It was the feeling of a siege. I am the watcher. The thought was simple, a statement of fact, devoid of pride or ego. I am drawn to the hunt, as a scavenger is drawn to a kill. My presence is a shield, a deterrent. The hunters are simple, primal things. They fear a greater predator. I looked at his shimmering, unstable form, and the entire narrative of my life's great, terrifying affliction was rewritten in an instant. The shadow people I saw as a child, they were the faint, early probes of lesser hunters, scared away by his peripheral presence. The pressure on my chest, which had always been terrifying but never truly harmful, it was the feeling of his presence reinforcing my own defenses, pushing back against theirs. This creature, this entity I had named the Glitch Man, the demon of my blog, had not been tormenting me. It had been protecting me. The visions of Clara were not a form of torture. They were a lesson, a desperate, non-verbal attempt to show me the true nature of the silent, nightly war being fought on the battleground of my own bed. and by forcing myself awake, by tearing a hole in the veil. I had just pulled my guardian angel out of the fight and into the physical world, leaving me exposed. A low, guttural snarl echoed in the room, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, a sound of furious, triumphant hunger. The Watcher's shimmering form flickered violently, like a candle in a hurricane. They know the shield is down, the thought came, and for the first time, it was laced with a new, unfamiliar emotion. A cold, static-laced version of alarm. You have left yourself unprotected. I looked towards the darkest corner of my room. The shadows there were deeper now, and they were beginning to coalesce, to move, to take on a familiar, oily, and utterly malevolent shape. The shadow in the corner of my room congealed, pulling itself together from the ambient darkness. It was not the vague, indistinct shape of the old shadow people. It was a specific, defined entity, a creature I knew with a horrifying, intimate familiarity. It was the gardener, the bloated, leering thing from Clara's nightmares, smelling of damp earth and rot, was manifesting in my bedroom. Its form was still semi-ethereal, a thing of shadow and suggestion, but it was undeniably present, a patch of absolute, predatory wrongness that seemed to suck the very light and warmth from the air. It ignored the Watcher. Its attention, its immense, silent hunger, was focused entirely on me. This was the hunter whose feeding I had interrupted, and it was furious. The pressure on my chest returned, 100 times stronger than before, a physical, crushing force that slammed me back against my pillows, even though I was fully awake. This was not a subtle, parasitic link. This was a brute force assault. The Watcher's form shimmered violently, its 2 points of light flaring. It is too strong in this state. The thought pulsed in my mind, the alarm now a sharp, piercing signal. Your consciousness is a bridge. You are anchoring it to this plane. Was the doorway, and my anger on Clara's behalf had flung it wide open. The gardener flowed out from the corner, a river of silent, hungry shadow, its vine-like tendrils slithering across the floor towards my bed. I was utterly helpless, a fly in a spider's web, watching my doom approach. I tried to scream, but the pressure on my chest was absolute, my lungs paralyzed. Then the Watcher moved. It did not walk. It simply glided, a silent, static-wreathed figure, placing itself between my bed and the advancing hunter. It raised one of its long, thin, translucent arms. A low, resonant hum filled the room, the same sound as the static from the deep web. Radio signal, but now amplified into a weapon. The gardener recoiled, its shadowy form wavering as if struck by a physical blow. The pressure on my chest lessened slightly. This is a temporary state. The Watcher communicated, its thoughts now strained, focused. I cannot maintain a stable physical form here. My energy dissipates. I am a shield, not a sword. The hunt must be fought on the plane of the hunt. It turned its featureless head, its 2 points of light fixing on me. You have torn the veil. You have proven you are more than a passive vessel. You have a choice. Cower here, in the physical world, and wait for my energy to fail, or return with me. Return to the state of paralysis, but this time as a combatant. Become a shield for another, as I have been a shield for you. The hunt for the one called Clara is not over. Her guardian is weak. She will be consumed tonight unless another takes its place. The choice was a stark and terrifying ultimatum. Could stay here, in the waking world, and face the gardener alone when the Watcher's strength inevitably gave out. or I could willingly plunge back into the suffocating, motionless horror of sleep paralysis, into the very state I had spent my entire life fighting, but this time as a protector. The gardener was already coalescing again, its form growing darker, more solid. I had seconds to decide. My own survival, or a desperate, insane attempt to save a woman I had only ever met in a shared nightmare. There was no choice, not really. The thought of cowering in my bed, waiting for the Watcher's protective shield to fail and for that thing to crawl on top of me, was a far greater terror than willingly facing the paralysis. But it was the thought of Clara, her face a mask of silent, looping terror, that sealed my decision. I would not be a spectator to her demise. "I'll go," I gasped, the words ragged, the first sound I had made since breaking free. How? The Watcher did not need words. It glided closer, its tall, shimmering form standing beside my bed. "Lie down," the thought instructed, calm and direct. "Clear your mind. Find the edge between your waking thoughts and the dream. I will guide you to the severance point." I obeyed, my body trembling as I lay back against the pillows. The gardener hissed from the corner, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement, as if sensing my intent. The pressure on my chest was still there, a constant, threatening weight. I closed my eyes, and with the Watcher's silent guidance, I did something that went against every survival instinct the first possessed. I stopped fighting. I surrendered to the pressure. I let the paralysis reclaim me. The transition was instantaneous and violent. I was not in my bedroom anymore. I was somewhere else, a place of pure, conceptual sensation. I had no body. I was a single point of disembodied awareness, floating in a vast, grey, twilight dimension. This was the plane of the hunt, the space between realities. The Watcher was beside me, its form more stable here, a towering figure of pure, humming energy. "She is close," its thoughts directed me, and the grey landscape began to move. Or rather, I began to move through it, pulled along by an unseen current. The connection is the emotion, your anger, your protective instinct. That is the tether. I saw it then, a faint, flickering light in the distance. As we grew closer, the light resolved into a scene. It was Clara's bedroom, a perfect, ghostly replica suspended in the grey void. We were outside it, looking in, like scientists observing a diorama. Inside, Clara lay frozen in her bed, her real-world body in the throes of sleep paralysis. And the gardener was there, here on its home turf. It was no longer a thing of mere shadow. It was a colossal, terrifyingly solid entity. Its body was a writhing mass of thorny vines and black, rotting soil. Its head a blooming corpse flower, its leering face made of curled, decaying petals. It was crouched on the ceiling, its tendrils slowly, deliberately snaking down towards her. One could also see her guardian, a faint, wispy creature of pale light, flickering weakly like a dying bulb, desperately trying to push back against the gardener's immense, suffocating presence. It was losing. The shield fails, the Watcher's thought echoed beside me. You must reinforce it. Project your will. Become the wall. I did not know how. I had no hands to fight with, no voice to scream a warning. I had only my consciousness. I focused on the image of Clara, on the raw, protective rage I had felt in my own room. I remembered the sensation of pushing against my own paralysis, that feeling of pure, defiant will. And I pushed. I gathered every scrap of my identity, my anger, my empathy, and I projected it forward. A silent, psychic roar, aiming for the space between the monster and its victim. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the gardener's colossal, floral head snapped up from Clara, its attention turning from its prey. It had felt me, and its horrifying, petal-strewn face turned to stare directly at me through the invisible wall of Clara's room. Its expression one of pure, ravenous hunger. The gardener's attention was a physical force. I felt its cold, hungry focus lock onto my consciousness, and the grey, twilight dimension around me warped and twisted. The Watcher's presence beside me was a steady, humming anchor in the psychic storm. It sees you now, the thought came, calm and instructive. It recognizes you as a threat. The hunt has shifted. The monster, which had been a looming, slow-moving horror, now moved with terrifying speed. It abandoned its slow descent towards Clara and launched itself sideways, crashing against the invisible, dimensional wall of her bedroom diorama. The entire scene shuddered, the ghostly image of her room flickering violently. The gardener was trying to break out of her hunt and into the space where I was. It wanted me now. Good, the Watcher communicated. A predator's focus is its greatest weakness. You are the bait. Now, you must become the shield. Do not fight it. Reinforce her. I did not understand. Fight, but do not fight. Reinforce. The Watcher's thoughts clarified, accompanied by a stream of pure, instructional data. I was to become a part of Clara's own subconscious defense. I was to lend my strength to her failing guardian. I focused again, pushing past the gardener's terrifying, direct gaze. I looked at the scene inside the room, at the faint, flickering light of Clara's guardian. It was a pale, humanoid shape, almost completely overwhelmed by the dark, heavy presence of the gardener pressing against the room's boundary. I reached out with my consciousness, not with aggression, but with an offering of support. I projected a single, clear thought towards it. You are not alone. The effect was immediate. The pale, flickering light of her guardian flared, its light intensifying, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. It had felt me. It was drawing on my energy. The gardener let out a silent, frustrated roar, pounding against the walls of the diorama again, furious that its prey was suddenly fighting back. The shield holds, the Watcher's thought echoed, but it is a temporary measure. A hunt cannot be stopped. It can only be concluded. Either the hunter feeds, or it is repelled. Her guardian is too weak. You must take its place. You must enter the hunt. Enter the hunt. The words filled me with a primal dread. I would have to leave this relatively safe, observational space and enter the battle itself. I would have to manifest inside her nightmare how I projected my own thoughts a trembling signal. The same way you brought me into your world, the Watcher replied, with a fulcrum of emotion. But this time, it is not your anger, it is your empathy. You feel her fear, you feel her struggle. Use it, connect with her, become the anchor she needs. I looked at the ghostly image of Clara, frozen and helpless in her bed. I focused on the memory of my own paralysis, the suffocating pressure, the absolute terror. I let her fear become my fear. I let her struggle become my struggle. I forged a bridge of shared experience, of pure, desperate empathy between my consciousness and hers. The grey, twilight dimension around me dissolved. The observer's perspective vanished. I was no longer looking at the diorama of Clara's bedroom. I was in it. I was standing on the floor, a shimmering, translucent form of my own, facing down the colossal, monstrous form of the gardener. And for the first time in my life, I was on the other side of the paralysis. I was the visitor. I was the demon. Manifesting inside Clara's hunt was a disorienting, exhilarating terror. I had a form, but it was like the Watcher's shimmering, translucent body made of pure will, wreathed in a faint static. I could feel the very fabric of her dreamscape around me, the air thick with her fear. The gardener, now inside the room with me, was a towering mountain of rot and thorns, its corpse flower head swiveling to face me, its new, more interesting prey. Clara was still frozen in her bed, a spectator to the impossible battle unfolding. In her own subconscious, her original guardian, the pale, flickering light, hovered near her, now just a faint auxiliary glow, its energy almost completely spent. The Watcher was gone. I was alone, a shield, not a sword. Its last instruction echoed in my mind. I understood now. I was not here to fight the gardener in a physical sense. I was a psychic barrier, a second wall of defense. I planted my new, ethereal feet on the floor and focused, projecting a wall of pure, defiant energy. The gardener lunged, its vine-like tendrils lashing out, not with physical force, but with waves of pure, concentrated terror and despair. They washed over me, a psychic onslaught of cold, sharp-edged emotions. But they were familiar. They were the same feelings I had endured my entire life. I held my ground, my translucent form flickering but not breaking. I was a dam holding back a flood of nightmares. We were locked in a stalemate. I could not harm it, and it could not get past me to its original prey. But I could feel my own energy, my own conscious will beginning to wane. I was a novice in this world, and it was an ancient, powerful predator. It began to change its tactics. It stopped projecting generalized terror and started showing me things. Visions tailored to my own fears, pulled from my own mind. It showed me, my own apartment, empty and silent, the world having moved on without me, my death a forgotten footnote. It showed me my blog, the final post a frantic, incoherent mess, the comments below it, a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. It was trying to break my will, to find a crack in my shield. But then it made a mistake. It showed me an image of myself, back in my own bed, my body lying there, unprotected, while a new hunter, a creature of smoke and broken glass, began to coalesce in the corner of my room. It was a bluff, a desperate attempt to make me abandon my post, but in that moment, I realized the truth. The Watcher had not abandoned me. It was in my room, guarding my empty, sleeping body. I was not alone. The realization solidified my will. The shield held. The gardener let out another silent, psychic roar of fury. Then, a new presence entered the room. It was not a hunter. It was another Watcher. It was Clara's original guardian, its pale light suddenly flaring with a renewed, desperate strength. It had used the time I had bought it to recover, to draw on Clara's own strengthening resolve. Now there were two of us. We did not communicate with words, but our intent was unified. We projected our will together, a combined shield of defiance. The gardener, faced with two guardians, finally faltered. Its attack lessened. Its form began to waver, the psychic pressure it exerted receding. It was not defeated, but it was repelled. It recognized that the energy required to overcome us both was no longer worth the meal. With a final, lingering wave of pure, hateful malice, its colossal form dissolved back into the shadows of the room. The hunt was over. The pressure was gone. Clara's ghostly bedroom began to fade around me, her guardian giving me a final, silent pulse of what I could only interpret as gratitude. I was being pulled back, my consciousness returning to its source. The last thing I saw before I left was Clara, still in her bed, as she finally, blessedly, broke free from her paralysis, lurching upright with a gasp of air. I returned to my body with a jolt, like a diver surfacing too fast. I gasped, my lungs burning, my heart pounding a frantic, syncopated rhythm. I was in my own bed, in my own room. The morning light, pale and grey, was filtering through my window. The night was over. My body ached with a profound, soul-deep exhaustion. But it was a different kind of fatigue. It was the satisfying, clean ache of a battle fought and won, not the weary, soul-sucking drain of being prey. The room was empty. The gardener was gone, and so was the watcher. The air was still, clean, and blessedly free of the electric hum of a supernatural presence. For the first time since I was a child, my room felt truly, completely safe. A profound sense of relief, so powerful it felt like a physical release, washed over me. I had done it. I had faced the monster. I had saved her. My first instinct was to go to my blog, to write down everything that had happened in a frantic, triumphant post. But I stopped myself. This was not a story to be shared. This was not a piece of creepy folklore for internet consumption. This was a secret, a key to a hidden world, and sharing it felt like a profound betrayal of the trust the Watcher had placed in me. Instead, I found Clara's blog. Her latest post had been made just an hour ago. "It's over," she wrote. "Last night was the worst it's ever been. The gardener was there, I was trapped, and I thought it was the end. But then, something happened. A new figure appeared in my paralysis. A man made of static and light. He fought it. He protected me. I don't know who or what he was, but he saved me. For the first time in 10 years, I feel ... free." Reading her words was a confirmation, a validation that made the whole terrifying ordeal worthwhile. A single anonymous comment was below her post, left just minutes before. It was from a user I didn't recognize. The comment was simple: "Good work, Julian." My blood ran cold. Julian, my real name. I had never used my real name on my blog or on hers. No one in this community knew who I was. I frantically tried to click on the user's profile, but it was blank, the account already deleted. A new creeping dread began to snake its way around my triumphant relief. My intervention had not gone unnoticed. I was no longer just another anonymous sufferer. I was on someone's, or something's, radar. The fight was not over. I had just announced myself as a new player on a hidden, cosmic chessboard. For the rest of the day, I was on edge. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow in the corner, a potential threat. But the day passed with an unnerving normalcy. The night came, and I went to bed with a heavy sense of trepidation. I did not know what to expect. Would the gardener return for revenge? Would the Watcher reappear? Or would I be left alone, my one act of heroism, a strange, singular event? I fell into a nervous, shallow sleep. And, for the first time in 28 years, I was not paralyzed. Nothing came. The night was completely, blessedly empty. The silence was absolute, and it was the most terrifying thing I had ever experienced. For a week, the silence continued. Every night, I slept a deep, dreamless, and utterly empty sleep. The paralysis did not return. The Watcher did not manifest. The crushing weight on my chest, a lifelong companion, was gone. The relief should have been absolute, but it was not. I felt ... exposed, vulnerable. The silence was not peaceful. It was the unnerving quiet of a battlefield after the armies have withdrawn. A silence that holds the memory of violence and the promise of its return. My blog lay dormant. What could I possibly write? My demon was actually my guardian angel. I fought another person's demon in a psychic battle, and now they're all gone. I would sound like a lunatic. The anonymity of our shared condition was a shield, and I had stepped out from behind it. The anonymous comment, "Good work, Julian," was a constant, looping echo in my mind. The answer came on a Saturday morning. A simple, plain manila envelope was slipped under my apartment door. There was no stamp, no return address. Inside was a single, laminated ID card and a small, folded note. The ID card was for a company I had never heard of, the Somnus Institute. It had my picture on it, a photo I had no memory of taking, and my name, Julian. The note was printed in a clean, impersonal font. It read, "Your probationary period has been successfully completed. Your performance in the field test with subject Clara M. exceeded all expectations. You have demonstrated a rare and valuable aptitude for voluntary, targeted projection. We have been watching you for a very long time. Your Watcher, as you call it, was one of our most promising but unstable agents. His decision to make direct contact and pull you through was a severe breach of protocol, but the results are undeniable. The Institute is formally offering you a position. We are a shield against the things you call hunters. We are a global network of guardians. The work is not a curse, it is a duty. A car will be waiting for you at 22 o'clock hours tonight. We hope you will join us." I sat there, in the quiet of my sunlit apartment, the ID card feeling heavy and cold in my hand. It was not a choice, it was a conscription. My entire life, my affliction, my blog, my connection with Claret had all been a long, elaborate recruitment process. I was not a random sufferer, I was a candidate. The Watcher was not some ancient, cosmic being. It was an agent, a scout sent to test my potential. The visions had not been a warning. They had been an aptitude test. I looked at the ID card, at my own face staring back at me. I thought of the profound, empty silence of my own protected sleep. And then I thought of the millions of others out there, the Claras of the world, who were still trapped in their own nightly battles, alone. The car would be here tonight. I knew I would be in it. My nights of being the haunted were over. Now I would learn how to become the ghost.